My son's teacher thought she could bully him because of his disability. She learned the hard way. All right, buckle up. This is long, but it's one of those stories where every little detail matters. And by the end, you'll understand why I didn't. Just fight back. I absolutely nuked this woman's career. I'm a single mom to one kid. Let's call him Eli. He's 11, in 5th grade at the time of this story, and he has cerebral palsy. He uses a wheelchair most of the time, sometimes crutches when he's feeling strong, and he has some trouble with fine motor skills. But here's the thing. This kid is brilliant. I'm not just saying that because I'm his mom. His teachers, therapists, and even random strangers comment on how sharp and witty he is. He'll drop puns out of nowhere. He'll solve math problems in his head faster than I can with a calculator. He's also stubborn. The good kind of stubborn. The kind that refuses to give up when something is hard. He's the type who will try to build a Lego set for hours, even when his hands cramp, just because he decided he wanted to do it himself. And when he does finally need help, he hates asking for it. That stubborn streak has always been both his biggest challenge and his biggest strength. For years, Eli's teachers were great, supportive, patient, creative. They worked with his IEP, Individualized Education Plan, and treated him like a full member of the class. Sure, sometimes kids stared or asked awkward questions, but teachers usually set the tone. Eli's just like everyone else. He just rolls instead of runs. Then came Ms. K. Ms. K had been teaching for over 20 years, and she loved to remind everyone of that. At the parent orientation, she introduced herself with, "I've seen it all. Nothing surprises me. I run a tight ship, but my kids always succeed." She had that overly wide smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. At first, I thought she'd be fine. Strict maybe, but fine. She complimented Eli's vocabulary, said she was excited to see how he'd challenge her. But there was something in the tone. The kind of compliment that feels like a backhanded one. Like she wanted to show off for the other parents. "Look at me. I'm already inspiring this little wheelchair boy." Still, I brushed it off. "You learn to develop a thick skin when you're raising a disabled kid. People say clumsy things all the time." I figured she'd adjust. 3 weeks into the school year, Eli came home different. Normally, he'd burst through the door and immediately start rambling about Pokemon, Star Wars, or whatever cool fact he learned that day. But now he was quiet. Dropped his backpack, rolled straight to his room, and closed the door. The first. Couple times I thought maybe he was just tired, but then I noticed something else. His homework folder was empty. I asked him about it, and he shrugged. "She doesn't give me homework." That didn't sound right, so I checked the class website. Sure enough, assignments were listed, pages of them. I asked Eli again. He looked down at the floor and said, "She says I don't need it because I already get too much help." Excuse me? That night, I emailed Ms. K, politely asking about the missing homework. She responded with, "Oh, I thought it might be too much for him, but if you'd like, I can start sending it home." Something about that phrasing rubbed me wrong. Too much for him. As if she'd decided, unilaterally, that Eli couldn't handle it. His IEP spelled out exactly how homework should be modified, not eliminated. A week later, Eli had a complete meltdown at the dinner table. He pushed away his plate, started crying, and blurted out, "She told the whole class I only get good grades because I'm in a wheelchair." I froze. He explained between sobs. Apparently, some kids had asked why his assignments sometimes looked different. Instead of using it as a teaching moment, Ms. K had said, "Well, Eli gets special treatment. That's why his work is easier." Then she actually made the class copy down one of his assignments as an example. My kid, who already hates asking for help, was mortified. He begged me not to make it worse by saying anything. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen staring at the table. I felt something boiling inside me. It wasn't just anger. It was that parental fury, the kind that makes you feel like you could lift a car off your child if you had to. I knew then, if this woman thought she could bully my kid, she had no idea who she was messing with. At first, a small part of me wondered, was Eli exaggerating? Kids sometimes do. Maybe she'd said it differently. Maybe he misheard. So I decided to be methodical. No wild accusations yet. I'd watch, listen, gather information, and oh boy, the information came pouring in. A few days later, another parent casually mentioned at pickup, "Hey, is Eli okay? My daughter said the teacher was kind of harsh with him in class. That cracked. The dam. I started gently asking other parents if their kids had noticed anything. At least 3 said their children mentioned Ms. K making snide comments like, "We can't all have things handed to us like Eli," or, "Eli slows us down, but we have to be patient." It was worse than I thought. One Friday, Eli came home, pale and shaky. He clutched a worksheet in his lap and handed it to me. Across the top, in red pen, Ms. K had written, "Try harder, no excuses." The worksheet was full of cramped writing, clearly done without his adapted keyboard. His IEP specifically required that he be allowed to type longer assignments because handwriting causes him pain. But she'd refused, forced him to write it out, then scolded him for the shaky letters. I looked at that paper and felt my hands literally shake. That was it. No more doubt, no more waiting. That was the night I bought a binder, dividers, and about 100 sheet protectors. If Ms. K wanted a war, I was going to fight it with receipts. I started with emails. Every exchange we'd had since the school year began, highlighted the dismissive comments. Then I added Eli's assignments, the ones marked missing even though he'd completed them. I stapled proof. I created a section for witness statements. I asked a few parents to jot down what their kids reported hearing. Some were vague, but one mom straight up wrote, "My son said Ms. K told the class Eli only gets extra credit for showing up in a wheelchair." Finally, I included a printout of Eli's IEP. I highlighted the accommodations Ms. K had blatantly ignored. As I built that binder page by page, I felt something shift. I wasn't just a worried mom anymore. I was preparing for battle. Our state is a one-party consent state when it comes to recording conversations, which means if you're part of the conversation, you're legally allowed to record it. That night, I dug through a drawer, pulled out an old digital recorder, and slipped it into Eli's backpack. The first day, the recording was muffled. A lot of shuffling papers, whispers, chairs squeaking. But then, clear as day, I heard Ms. K's voice. "If you keep asking me for help, Eli, you're never going to survive middle school. Life isn't going to hand you everything because of your wheelchair." I sat there, staring at the little machine in my hand, and my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. That was the nail in the coffin. From that point, I treated it like a second job. Emails, assignments, recordings, parent statements, every week I added more. By the end of October, my binder had grown to 2 inches thick. I color-coded it by category. I wasn't just a mom anymore. I was building a case file. One evening, Eli was supposed to be doing homework, but instead he just stared at his paper. His hands were clenched in fists. "Buddy, what's wrong?" I asked gently. He didn't answer at first. Then finally he whispered, "She says I'm the reason no one learns anything." I froze. "She said that?" He nodded. "She told the class she has to waste time on me." Everyone laughed. That broke me. Watching my kid, the boy who once begged me to quiz him on dinosaur facts at bedtime, sit there believing he was a burden. I knelt beside him and said, "Listen to me. You are not the problem, she is, and I'm going to fix it." My binder grew fatter. Parents told me their kids came home asking why Eli gets baby work. One father told me his son overheard Ms. K saying kids like Eli expect handouts. Every story went in the binder. Every sheet of paper, every highlight, every tab. By the time I requested the emergency IEP meeting, I had 2 binders, one with the originals, one with the presentation-ready evidence. The night before, I sat at the kitchen table rehearsing. I imagined Ms. K's smug smile. I imagined the principal looking bored. I imagined dropping that binder on the table, and the next morning that's exactly what I did. The conference room smelled of burnt coffee. The principal shuffled papers, the counselor clicked a pen, the district rep looked half asleep. Ms. K breezed in with that fake smile. "So glad you could make it. We're all concerned about Eli's performance." I smiled back. "Oh, I'm concerned too. Very concerned." She launched into her speech. According to her, Eli was lazy, disruptive, unmotivated. She wondered aloud if he even belonged in a mainstream classroom. That was my cue. I pulled out the binder and slammed it onto the table. The sound made everyone jump. "Funny you should say that, Ms. K, because I've been documenting Eli's so-called progress. Would you like to take a look?" Her face went white. I read aloud from her emails. Oh, I thought homework might be too much for him. I showed the website printouts, the missing assignments stapled to the completed ones. I slid across parent, testimonies, and then the pièce de résistance. I pressed play on the recorder. If you keep asking me for help, Eli, you're never going to survive middle school. Life isn't going to hand you everything because of your wheelchair. That's out of context, Ms. K sputtered. No context makes that acceptable, I shot back. I leaned forward. You violated his IEP. You humiliated him. You denied him accommodations. You targeted him for his disability. If this room doesn't act immediately, my next calls are the Department of Education, the school board, and my lawyer. Silence. 2 weeks later, Ms. K was on administrative leave. By Christmas, she was retiring early. But I wasn't done. I mailed my binder to the State Department of Education. Months later, I got a call. They'd had prior complaints, but nothing concrete enough to act on. My binder? It was the smoking gun. The investigation dragged on, but every call I answered, every document I provided, I knew the net was tightening. Other parents came forward with their own stories. And then, one July afternoon, the letter arrived. Ms. K's teaching license was revoked. Effective immediately. She would never teach again. I poured myself a glass of wine, raised it, and whispered, "Cheers, Ms. K. You messed with the wrong mom." Through the grapevine, I heard she tried to get hired at a tutoring center. No dice. She ended up working retail. Nothing wrong with that, but for someone who strutted around like the queen of education, that was a fall. The district, embarrassed, rolled out new training on IEP compliance. Other parents felt empowered to speak up. One even told me, "Seeing you fight gave me the courage to push back for my son." Eli got a new teacher, Mrs. D, who adored him. By the end of the year, he was back to his old self, bursting through the door after school, chattering about everything under the sun. One day he said, "Mom, Mrs. D says I should join debate team. She says I'm really good at arguing." I laughed until I cried. "Buddy, you have no idea." I still keep that binder. It sits on my shelf labeled Eli's case, a trophy. A reminder that one determined parent can take down a bully. Never underestimate a parent's love for their child. Ms. K thought nobody would believe a little boy in a wheelchair. She thought wrong. Today, Eli is thriving. And Ms. K? She's just another bitter ex-teacher with a revoked license, forever remembered as the woman who picked the wrong fight.